Good evening, everybody, and Mvskoke. So, forgive the mess. We're getting ready for the holidays. So, um, anyways, I was reading some of the comment sections of some of the videos, and not just that I've personally produced, but also other videos I've seen on, Creek history and a lot of different things relating to the tribe. And as some of you already know from if you watch some of my videos on the subject, you know that I bring up books and I bring up other videos, documentaries, and things like that that are relevant to the subject. And something that springs to mind is when reading comments in other people's videos, I notice that some people say, "Oh, well, and also on Facebook and things like that. It's like, oh, well, my grandparents are full bloods." Well, it's because the grandparents said they're full bloods. There is a oral tradition that exists within the tribe, and it's important to have an oral tradition. I think, and it's not just important for our tribe; it's important for every tribe. It's important for every people. Like the Irish people at one point had a very, very strong oral tradition. They still do, but it used to be much stronger. So did the Scots. So did other people with their folk tales and things like that. I'm not trying to relegate our oral tradition to being like folk tales and folklore and mythology. I'm not doing that. However, because I mean, the oral tradition could be strong and sometimes very accurate when compared with actual records, like written accounts that later get discovered and validate the tradition, for example. So again, you have those who are very much in the oral tradition and they believe their grandparents tell them. Whether it's completely true or not becomes irrelevant because grandma and grandpa said this, it must be true. They said they're full bloods, they must be full bloods. Okay. Then you have others who are more like, okay, well, I believe in science, I believe in facts, I believe in physical evidence, I believe in literary evidence, I believe in the truth based off of facts alone. Okay. Can you prove what you just told me is being true? Okay. You get that type of mentality, which I totally understand from a legalistic standpoint, it makes sense. So, but this is also where witnesses come in. And you get lawyers where it's like, okay, you have the physical facts, then you also have witnesses. And witnesses, especially in witnesses of good reputation within the community who are trusted, those witnesses can act as a fact, basically. Yeah, that makes sense. So, what am I getting at with this? What I'm getting at is that, so I'm somewhere in the middle. So I believe things my mom has told me. I also know that not everything she's ever told me is true. Sorry. Our parents are not always 100% correct, and they're not always 100% truthful. That's just reality. It's something that we need to accept. I don't care how much we love our grandparents, our parents, our great-great-grandparents, our brothers and sisters. If you really know your family, you know they're full of crap sometimes. Okay, and I'm not saying my mom's totally full of crap. Okay, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody else's grandparents or parents or whoever. But you know your family. And you know if they're a very honest and good, true person, or if they're not quite on the up and up. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so, and they may not be trying to lie. They may just simply not have all the correct information. Okay, that's more often than not going to be the case when they are wrong. Hold on 1 second. We gotta skip the ads for this kid. So I want to assume people's honesty. I don't want to assume that people are lying about stuff. No, I don't believe in ancient aliens. That show has actually been, it's debunkable. Let's put it that way. Whether aliens exist or not, that's another story. But Ancient Aliens, the TV show, has a lot of flaws. Let's put it that way. Okay? They straight up lie about some things. I've seen the proof of that. So they have an agenda. A lot of people have agendas. So, but some people are just honest, good people. And they say they saw this, and if they say they saw it, well, I'm not going to say they didn't see it. Whether what they saw is what they think it is another story. But whether they actually saw something, I can believe that. You know what I'm saying? And there's people that you get to know where you know they're not full of crap about things. You know that they're just good and honest, you know. And then you got those who are good and honest, but they also do drugs. And maybe what they saw wasn't really there to begin with, or maybe what they saw was more of a vision. And I very much believe in visions, you know. There's so many possibilities when it comes to finding truth. And so, again, trying to come full circle to the point I'm trying to make is that you have people in the tribe that believe what grandma and grandpa say. They say they're full blood. Well, I can probably use the scientific method and pull up all the historical records and say, okay, well, it looks like their great-great-grandfather was of Scottish descent. His last name was McIntosh. Okay. Or, oh, wait a second. This guy's great-great-grandmother was actually black. You know, like her family became freedmen or whatever, right? Maybe her husband was Creek, or maybe their son married a Creek woman, and then, you know, whatever, right? Whatever the case may be. But yeah, so for me, it's like, I'm going to be somewhere in the middle because I very much believe that tradition is important, and I believe that much of tradition is correct. But I also understand that the scientific data is also going to play a part. Now, I don't believe all scientific theories. I do not. When they say trust the science, I'm not one who automatically trusts the science, because I don't think all scientific theories are actually rooted in complete truth. They may take a few facts that would seem to back up their hypothesis, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the hypothesis is actually correct in any way. I mean, you might find one other piece of evidence in the dirt somewhere that's going to totally debunk that, and maybe very easily, because that theory wasn't as strong as people thought. There's science that's actually scientific, and there's science where it's like, yeah, this is still kind of theoretic, but people accept it as being real. Okay, that's not me. Okay, and I get it. I can go on about that. It's a whole different topic. That's several different topics that are all related to that I can get into, which I won't at this time. But the thing is, if you don't know your whole genealogy, like your father's 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 father, your mother's 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 mother, and your father's mother's mother's father's mother's father's father's mother, etc., if you don't know that stuff by heart, and you don't like to go by the scientific information, if you will, the written records, books, that's the word I'm thinking of, books, because there's somebody in one of the comments in a video I watched, a Mvskoke video, where the guy's like, oh yeah, you just learned that from books, da 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 da. And then like this other guy says, hey, I'm like, you know, I'm not sure if he's a medicine man. No, he's a medicine man. He's like, no, I speak the language, or I'm fluent, or I go to the ceremonial grounds or something. It was something where it's like, all of a sudden they knew each other, and all of a sudden, you know, the dialogue changed, and it was all positive. And he's like, oh, well, you know, we're both Wind clans, so I guess we're brothers. And the guy's like, well, hey man, we're all brothers. You know, remember that. You know, show respect. You know, and it was just like, you know, that conversation came to an end because it became, it's like, oh crap, I actually know you, and we're clan brothers. So it's like, I can't talk down to you because you're not one of these Holanis or whatever, you know, the word for mixed. I'm totally mispronouncing it, I know. I've been referred to as that in Facebook comments because of my opposition to Eli Grayson trying to get President Obama back in 2011, September, I think it was, holding up a sign, Highway 75, saying, you know, please President Obama, you know, et cetera, something like, you know, please get the freedmen, please force Creek Nation to bring the freedmen back in. So I'm like, for me, it wasn't so much whether the freedmen should or shouldn't be there. It was more like Creek Nation needs to make that decision. It needs to be 100% in the hands of Creek Nation. So long story short, I'm not going to get into all, I've gotten to that type of stuff in other videos. After unfriending Eli, they, you know, and going about my life, I've seen other things since that time in cyberspace. And basically, the attitude is like, oh, you learned this in a book. It's like, well, okay, so what? You don't read? You can flip it around and make the person into an ignoramus because They don't read books. They apparently don't think that books are important to find real legitimate information. Well, there's tons of history in the tribe that is from books. Okay, let me put this in perspective. We talk about how the elders, when they die, they lose a whole, there's a ton of information. There's a ton of stuff that gets lost. The thing you got to keep in mind when it comes to learning is that elder may have, his whole lifetime of knowledge is basically gone now that he's gone, except for what he passed on. The problem is, like, a person is like a library. They have tons of information. Unless you study their life, their entire life while they're living it, you're not going to have all that knowledge. Unless you experience all the same things that they experience, you're not going to have all that knowledge. So it literally cannot all get passed on. But you can have other people that are alive at the same time, experiencing a lot of the same events, the same spiritual journey, the same political turmoil, all that stuff that goes on, and they can write that stuff down in books. And what happens is that you, whose grandfather is an elder that dies and doesn't pass on everything that he knew because, you're not old enough to have all of his knowledge, well, you can still gain some of that knowledge, sort of indirectly, if you will, maybe kind of directly. This other person probably knew your grandfather and remembered things, maybe even mentioned them in their account. This is why books are important. When Apathalia said to learn the ways of the white man, undoubtedly things like, reading and writing were among those things. Being legally savvy and things like that were obviously going to become important for our survival as a tribe, as a nation. So, learning things from books is pretty important. It's a good way to look back into the past and say, oh, okay, well, we have this now, but they were doing things a little bit different back then according to this information. Well, the guy who says my grandparents say they're full-bloods, what, you learned that from a book? Well, he's going to assume that book is just wrong because my grandpa didn't say that. Well, then who's the ignorant person? It's like, yeah, okay, maybe you did spend your entire upbringing going to the medicine traditions. Guess what? I knew a guy in Wilika who didn't even know what clan he belonged to, and he's a full-blood. And he went to the medicine tradition his entire life. He already pretty much had a wife pretty much designated for him, and he's 20 years old. I'm not going to give his name out. But basically, that's something that, they're trying to set him up with his girl, and that was his girlfriend. And it sounded like they were going to get married at some point. It seems like trying to keep the full-bloods marrying full-bloods is definitely a thing. But he couldn't tell me what clan he belonged to. It's like, how do you not know that? It didn't help that he also didn't actually have a citizenship in the tribe because he was born in California, and his mom didn't actually get the state certified birth certificate that Cree Nation requires. I don't know why they don't take the county certified, because it's better, because it's actually from where you were born instead of having to go to the state capital for it. It's a stupid technicality that should be revised, honestly. But anyways, neither here nor there. Point is, he didn't have his birth certificate, he didn't have citizenship, but he's a full-blooded Creek Indian and a hell of a nice guy. Okay, yeah, I mean, he drove me to Okima Clinic and things like that. And his sister's nice. She gave me rides also. Just, nice people. Like the kids. I guess the parents had some problems, so. But I'm not going to give names again. I don't want to say anything bad about the parents, especially if any of them have passed away. And if any of them passed away, it probably would have been the dad. But I'm not going to say why, because I don't want to reveal who the person is. Out of respect and love for them and, everything. So, but how do you not know what clan you belong to? Okay, your clan is your mom's clan, and her clan is her mom's clan, and that's how it goes. And if your dad's a full blood also, well, then his mom has a clan, therefore he has a clan, therefore you're a son of that clan. You belong to your mom's, you're a son of your dad's clan. How do you not know these things? And not be fluent in Creek either, for that matter. Or I think his sister had to learn Creek from the schools. Her grandparents spoke a more traditional dialect, but she was learning Creek from the schools because as a kid they learn English. That's the way it is. But still, they grew up in the medicine tradition or the traditional ceremonial grounds, and it's but they still don't know certain things. Of course, I didn't ask the sister what clan she was. But I asked the brother, and it's It's just, I was kind of like, you know, it was nice, but I was like surprised. Like, I didn't show my surprise, but I was like, just, it rolled in my head for a while, and it still does. So, being a full blood, going to ceremonials, you know, living out there, you know, being with a Creek girl, all this stuff, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to have all this knowledge. Okay. It has to get passed on to you, and you have to do your own due diligence. And so people can say, oh, yeah, well, I've gone there my whole life. You know, you just learned that from a book. Yeah. So I read. You know, can you read? Because I can. Obviously they can too, because they're typing up these stupid messages. But I mean, on one hand, I get where they're coming from because of the living tradition, and a living tradition is super important. You're not going to teach medicine, the medicine tradition, through books necessarily. Although there's been books on the subject that have documented this stuff, and I know for a fact that some of that stuff is correct. Because some of the guys at the Okmulgee archive were like, oh yeah, this stuff shouldn't even be in the books. Yeah, this is, you know, there's like a couple of guys that were there that didn't think that was okay, but they weren't even aware these books were in their library, that, or at least contain the information in them that they did. And these guys worked at the library. So, I mean, so yeah, anyways, you can reconstruct a ceremonial grounds through books. And if all the script is written down, you can, you know, do that hypothetically, but it's going to be a reenactment. It wouldn't be the real thing. And that I mean, I already knew that. I already figured as much, but that was also explained to me by one of the CHR drivers, who's gone, you know, he explained to me, because he's from Tekabachi or Tukabachi. It sounded like he said Tekabachi. I was like, what? I thought it was Tukabachi, but yeah, the others say Tukabachi. So I think Tukabachi is probably more correct. But yeah, he explained to me how the ceremonial grounds are no longer like active, and that there might be one person that knows the song, but that's like, they're not totally sure. Anyways, to this day, from 2011 to the present time, I know from 2011 when I heard about all this, or, you know, maybe late 2010, probably early 2011, from that point on until now, it's the former ceremonial grounds. It's the late Tukabachi ceremonial grounds. Anyways, I'm ranting on something else. So anyways, it's very important to have the living tradition. It's also very important to read books and learn about the battles. Because look, you can hear a tradition that, oh yeah, this person's, oh yeah, supposedly you have some white blood somewhere back there. And it's like, they don't know who it is, but then you look at the last name and it's like Hill or Hale, and it's like, oh, there was that Hannah Hale girl that was married off to as either Far Off Warrior or Far Off Warrior's son. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Far Off Warrior that she was married off to, and the dad like kidnapped her from the village he took, and then married her off to his son. Anyways, the elders didn't know this though. All they knew is that this guy had some white blood. So, and but I guarantee you, some of these same elders will look at Puthalihola and say, "Oh yeah, he's a full blood." No, he's not. Like it's either his dad or his paternal grandfather that was white. So he was not a full blood. So I mentioned this stuff before, but so I won't get too much into that. But it's really important to have a living tradition, but it's also important to look at some of the physical data as well. This is where family trees come into play. You need to learn the names of your grandparents, grandparents. If that information is available through documentation, you need to memorize that stuff. I can't remember all the dates or necessarily all the exact locations, but I can remember. But as far as my Mvskoke lineage is concerned, I have that stuff memorized. I know the names of the ancestors. I know the names of many of the siblings. So I know some of the names of the multiple wives that these guys had. Okay. I have at least 2 ancestors from Arbika that had multiple wives. So, because that was okay back then. That was in the tradition. So, anyways, I want to wrap this up, but go 20 minutes into this. But yeah, so you'll never know about the Battle of Horseshoe Bend if not from the books written about it. You'll never know entirely by the Trail of Tears, from the living tradition, if people aren't talking about every single detail, every person, the date on the Gregorian calendar that we all use. Okay, we use the Gregorian calendar. Okay, you're not going to know all this stuff from the old tradition. You're going to know it from books. And these books are going to explain why we got to Oklahoma from Alabama and Georgia, how all this stuff happened, what Andrew Jackson did. Even if we remember the name of Andrew Jackson through an oral tradition, you're not going to know all the details without books. And you may not care about all that data. You may only care about, oh, I'm alive, I'm Mvskoke, and that's it. Bada boom, bada bing, okay? But that's not going to answer all the questions that people have. People want to know more than that. And yeah, people want to know the cosmology, they want to know the ceremonial ways, they want to learn the language, they want to know all these things, which are super important and which are still alive, okay? But there's also more. And there's a lot of bad history being taught. And so, like when I mentioned the Freedmen issue, I was just watching part of a video about, I think it was Salazar from Mvskoke Media, who was talking with the head of the president of the Freedmen Band, the Creek Freedmen Band, to be specific. And I'm just thinking, I know that people look at the 1866 treaty as like some great thing. It wasn't great for the Creek people. And so anybody, including Mr. Salazar, who might be more friendly on the subject, they need to look at the actual wording of that treaty and look at the implications and the ramifications. Look what happened to the Little Creeks and how it took almost 100 years to finally get paid back and multiple lawsuits because they kept trying to shortchange us. This is thanks to the 1866 treaty. It really isn't, it had a lot to do with why we didn't get paid back, and, the Little Creek suffered the most. So, but you wouldn't know any of that without books, documentation, things like that. All of that's important. If you don't like to read books because you only want to believe what grandma and grandpa say, well, then you're not going to have all the information. You're going to expect them to spend their whole lives explaining everything to you. Not going to happen. Okay, I got a 3-year-old here, and I got to spend more time with this kid and talk to him more. But you know what? There's also time I need to just relax to myself and make videos like this when these topics get into my mind. Okay? And yeah, so your grandparents aren't going to be able to sit down and explain everything to you. And a lot of your grandparents may only want to speak to you in Creek. And you may not be able to have many conversations because you don't speak it because your parents never taught you. And that sucks, but it's a reality. Same thing happened to my great-grandma. She couldn't talk to her grandpa, and then he got killed by white cowboys. Okay? So, anyways, yeah. So, it's a, sorry, I'm just thinking about that. It's just kind of, that puts me in a bit of a bad mood, actually. I'm trying to, I've heard through oral tradition that my great-great-grandmother Sally was a really great lady, a very good religious woman, a good Christian lady, okay? And my great-grandma was also likewise. And great-great-grandma's dad is the one that was killed by cowboys, so I'm going to try to make this a little more positive. Oral tradition says that she was a good lady, okay? The written tradition, because I came across a document recently, basically a lawsuit against her and her second husband, not my great-great-grandfather, but, my step-great-great-grandpa, who's also a good man. And they're both good men. And, of course, you figure Sally would only end up with a good man, right? So they bought some property in Okima. No, Okima. Gotta try to say it like Aunt Darlene. But so in Okima, they got some land. They bought it from a guy who was illiterate, but he was smart. Like, he knew how to do all the numbers in his head, and people knew this. What happened is, it was during the 1920s, we're on the verge of depression at that time. So they bought the land, and, they agreed to buy the land, and then they did some improvements on the land and paid off some of the back taxes or something. And so what happens is the guy realizes the property is technically could be worth double what he was actually already being paid. And so he decided to say, I'm mentally not stable and I need my land back. Almost happened too. But for the witnesses that said, you know, no, this guy's smart. He did numbers in his head. Sure, he's illiterate, but that's not exactly, that doesn't make him crazy or incompetent. Okay. And we have witnesses that show that, you know, he was in fact aware. Like he went with the lawyers to the lawyer's office to sign the paperwork, agreeing to sell to Mr. Ray. So, you know, long story short, this guy tried to screw them over. Okay, like after he wanted to get back what he already sold them, so he can try to sell for double probably. After they paid him money, kept him on as an employee, no less, to help him out. And it's like the written tradition, the written facts have actually validated what I've heard in the oral tradition about my great grandma being such a good lady, and that that second husband was a good guy. Yeah, he's a bootlegger too. Yeah, that was the era of prohibition. I got some stories about that, but or at least one good story about that involving my grandma as a little girl. So, but yeah, anyways, and moonshine. But other than that, which a lot of people were doing, by the way, and, you know, if not for prohibition, alcohol wouldn't have been illegal to begin with, or at least the distribution of it, or whatever the particulars are. But other than being a bootlegger, he was a good guy. Okay, he wasn't like some criminal hurting people. He was actually a good, honest guy trying to do the right thing. So, and you know what? I can't blame him for paying half the value. It wasn't like he's trying to say, oh, I'm only going to give you like 5%, and then like screw him over. No, that was not the case. And they tried to make it look like something like that was the case. You know, it was the 1920s. So if he's paying like 50 cents on the dollar, that might be the best the guy can get at the time, even if in some places the property is supposedly worth more. I mean, maybe, yeah, sure, people have things that are worth money, doesn't mean that they're going to be able to sell it. Someone else might not be able to buy it. So think about that. So anyways, yeah, he was a good guy, and Mr. Ray was, and Sally was a good woman, and the documents have proven that. So yes, facts are important. Oral tradition is important. They're both very important. I believe in both of them. Okay, you can't really have the truth in one without the other, it seems like. So, I mean, you can create incorrect traditions generationally, and we need to avoid that. And that's why education is important. That's why talking to your kids is important, and you know, all that stuff. But yeah, anyways, those are kind of my thoughts. So, if you're a traditional Mvskoke man or woman and you think, oh no, you're just some Holani guy who, you know, doesn't want to, you know, who just learns everything from books. No, I've learned some stuff from people in my family and from others I've talked to. But then there's, of course, the studying that I've done. I can speak more of the language, and it's not very much, but I can speak more of the language than some who have grown up around that, who are full-bloods. And that saddens me. And it should sadden you too. And it should also encourage you at the same time to go out there and learn the language. Go do it, okay? I'm trying to learn it, okay? I can count 1 to 10 now, just in the last week or two, making sure I can do that in Creek, okay? Anyways, but that's for another time. Let me know what your thoughts are, because I really think that this is an important subject on both ends. It's really important on both ends to have this. Oh, one little final thought too about that, as far as is grandpa really grandpa? Is daddy really daddy? You know, this is why the matrilineal tradition is important too. So it's very important to, yeah, someone might say, well, how do you know your genealogy is correct? How do you know that they weren't screwing somebody else? You're right, I don't know that. All I have is documentation that says that this person is the child of those people, you know? And I got an oral tradition that says that these are the people. That's the best you can do sometimes. So anyways, let me know what your thoughts are. But no for watching.